Okay, so lesson 5 is about time zones, and we need to use these two websites here to research some of the questions about time zones. Okay, so question 1, what is the time zone what is the time in Sydney now? And it says use this website to answer this question. So Sydney, we just need to search for Sydney. So at the moment, it's 2:36 p.m. in Sydney. So this is going to be different for everyone. So you just need to write your time in. What is the time in Adelaide right now? Search for Adelaide. And the time in Adelaide is 2:06 p.m. So they're half an hour behind. So Adelaide is half an hour behind Sydney, you can see. What's the time in Perth? Let's check Perth. So the time in Perth right now is 12:37 p.m. Oh, it would have been 12:36. You can see that we've just gone into the new minute here. So let's just write 12:36 p.m. So Perth, if it's 12:36 p.m. in Perth and it's 2:36 p.m. in Sydney, that means that Perth is 2 hours behind us. So what's the time difference between Sydney and Perth? 2 hours. If you were in Sydney at 1:22 p.m. and you made a call to a friend in Perth, what time would it be for them when they answered the call? So we know that Perth is 2 hours behind Sydney, okay? So if it's 1:22 p.m. in Sydney, then we just have to subtract 2 hours from that time, and that will tell us the time that it is in Perth, because it's going to be 2 hours earlier in Perth, 2 hours before 1:22 p.m. So 1:22, well, if we subtract 1 hour, we'll be at 12:22 p.m. And if we subtract another hour, we'll be at 11:22 a.m. If a friend in Perth made a call at 5 p.m. their time to you in Sydney, what time would it be for you when you answered the call? Okay, so what time is it going to be in Sydney if it's 5 p.m. in Perth? And we know that Perth is 2 hours, remember, 2 hours behind Sydney. So 5 p.m., that's the earlier time. They're behind us. We're actually 2 hours ahead. So we need to go 2 hours forward in time from 5 p.m. So the time in Sydney is going to be 5 plus 2 hours. So it's going to be 7 p.m. What's the time difference between Sydney and Adelaide? Okay, so we already worked it out. It was 30 minutes. Adelaide was half an hour behind us. So if we check up here, it's 2:36 p.m. in Sydney and it's only 2:06 p.m. in Adelaide. So they're half an hour behind. So the time difference was 30 minutes. If you were in Sydney at 4:45 p.m. and you made a call to a friend in Adelaide, what time would it be for them when they answered the call? So it's 4:45 p.m. in Sydney. We want to know what's the time in Adelaide. So we know Adelaide is half an hour behind. They're 30 minutes behind us. So we need to subtract 30 minutes from the time in Sydney here. So 4:45 p.m. minus 30 minutes, it's going to be 4:15 p.m. So it's still only 4:15 p.m. in Adelaide, even though it's 4:45 p.m. in Sydney. If a friend in Adelaide made a call at 12:30 p.m. in their time, in Adelaide time, to you in Sydney, what time would it be for you when you answered the call? So they're half an hour behind us. So 12:30 p.m. this is Adelaide time. So that's going to be half an hour behind our time. So if it's half an hour behind and it's 12:30, then that means it must be 1 p.m. in our time. We just have to add half an hour because we're half an hour forward. We're half an hour in the future. Well, not in the future, but where our time zone is actually, we need to add 30 minutes to this. So it's 1 p.m. in Sydney and it's still only 12:30 p.m. in Adelaide. Okay, use this website now to answer questions 10 to 12. Okay, here's a handy guide to Australia's time zones. Okay, so we've got some frequently asked questions, and that's pretty much it. So we don't have a lot to look through. Let's see what we need to find out. How many time zones do we have in Australia? So if we click this first one, how many time zones are there in Australia? It says that Australia is divided into 3 separate time zones, okay? We've got Australian Eastern Standard Time, so that's on the east. AEST, that's what we call it for short. We've got Australian Central Standard Time, so that's obviously Central Australia, the states in the middle, Adelaide and the Northern Territory, or Adelaide's not a state, South Australia and the Northern Territory, sorry. And then we've got Australian Western Time, Australian Western Standard Time. So that's going to be Western Australia. So there's 3 time zones in Australia. What does AEST stand for? Well, we just said it stands for Australian Eastern Standard Time. What states and territories apply daylight savings in summer? Oh, okay, so we're going to have to go back to the website for that one. It's not answered in this question, but let's look for something that says daylight savings. Here we go. Does Australia observe daylight saving time? In the Australian summer, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania and the ACT turn their clocks forward 1 hour to daylight saving time. Okay, so they're the states and territories that do participate in daylight savings. So what New South Wales does, we know that. We have to do daylight savings. We have to all turn our clocks forward when daylight savings starts. Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania and the ACT. Tasmania and Canberra is the ACT. So those are the states and territories that do apply daylight savings. The other ones don't do daylight savings. Okay, use this website now. So we're back to this website to answer questions 13 to 17. What is the time in London now? All right, let's look up. London comes up here. So you can search for London, but I've just found it already. So it's 5:43 a.m. in London. How many hours is Sydney ahead of London? Okay, so what was the time in Sydney right now? Let's look it up because it's changed. A couple of minutes have passed. So it's 2:43 p.m. in Sydney. I'm just going to write it here so we remember. 2:43 p.m. in Sydney. So from 5:43 a.m. to 2:43 p.m., what's the time difference between those two times? 5:43 a.m. in the morning. Well, let's take it to 12:43 p.m. How many hours are there between 5 a.m. and 12 p.m.? 12 minus 5 gives us 7. Okay, so there's 7 hours to 12:43 p.m. Now from 12:43 p.m., I'll write what I'm doing actually because I'm on laptop, so I can't write on it. If we add 7 hours to 5:43 a.m., we end up at 12:43 p.m. Now, what do we need to do to get to 2:43 p.m. from 12:43 p.m.? Well, that's just 2 hours later, isn't it? This is 12:43 midday and this is 2:43 in the afternoon, so it's just 2 hours later. So we need to add another 2 hours and we get to 2:43 p.m. So what did we do to get from London time here to Sydney time? We added 7 hours and we added 2 hours. So we added a total of 9 hours, which means that Sydney is 9 hours ahead of London. So I'll get rid of that now. What is the time in Auckland now? Okay, Auckland. So it's 4:45 p.m. in Auckland. So we'll write that down. 4:45 p.m. in Auckland. And we can remember that in Sydney, it's now going to be 2:45 p.m. because it was 2:43 p.m. 2 minutes ago when we did that question just up here. So it's 4:45 p.m. in Auckland in New Zealand, and it's 2:45 p.m. in Sydney. So how many hours is Sydney behind Auckland? We can see that we're behind now. 2:45 p.m. we're actually behind Auckland. It's already 4:45 p.m. in Auckland at the moment. So we're behind by 2 hours because there's a 2-hour time difference here from 2:45 p.m. to 4:45 p.m. It's a 2-hour difference. If you were in Sydney at 4 p.m. and made a call to a friend in Auckland, what time would it be for them when they answered the call? Okay, so remember that Auckland is ahead of us, okay? They're 2 hours ahead of us. We're 2 hours behind Auckland. So if it's 4 p.m. in Sydney, it has to be 2 hours in the future in Auckland. It has to be 2 hours ahead of 4 p.m. So we need to add 2 hours. So 4 plus 2 is 6. So it's going to be 6 p.m. in Auckland. And that's the end of that.